He wasn't a child when I met him. He was 23, taller than his father, quieter too, polite in a way that felt like armor. He didn't live with us. He had his own place, his own life. But he visited. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners where my husband tried too hard and I smiled too long. At first, I didn't think of him that way. I was his father's wife. Just that. Nothing more. I made the meals, cleaned the dishes, laughed at the right moments. It was a role I had learned to play well. The smiling second wife who never asks questions about the first. But over time, something shifted. He stayed a little longer after dinner, started asking about my job, my childhood, the music I listened to. Things his father never cared to learn. And then there was the night it happened. I was in the kitchen drying wine glasses. Everyone else had gone to bed. He stayed behind to help. Or that's what he said. We were standing close. Too close. And he looked at me like I was a woman, not a stepmother. He said, "You look lonely." I laughed, brushed it off. But I didn't step away. That was the first betrayal. Not the kiss. Not the touch. The moment I wanted it. It didn't happen that night. But the door was open, and we both knew it. After that night, I started noticing the small things. How he looked at me when I walked into a room. How his hand lingered just half a second longer when he passed me the salad. How he sat closer at dinner, like there was something unsaid pulling the air between us tighter. My husband didn't notice. He was too wrapped up in his work, his blood pressure, his endless monologues about the stock market and how millennials just don't try hard enough. He had stopped seeing me a long time ago, except when he needed someone to listen or someone to blame. But his son? He saw everything. He came by more often, with excuses. Just checking on Dad. Wanted to return that book. Figured I'd help with the garage. Always casual. Always just enough to make it look normal. But it wasn't. And I let it happen. I started dressing differently when I knew he'd be over. Subtle at first. A softer blouse. Perfume I hadn't worn in years. Then bolder. Lipstick. Heels. Things I had packed away with the version of myself I thought was gone. He never crossed a line. Not then. But his eyes did. Every time. And when my husband left town for a 3-day conference, I knew what I was doing when I invited his son to dinner. I told myself it was innocent. That I just didn't want to eat alone. That we were family. But I set the table for 2. Opened wine I'd been saving. Played music I used to dance to when I was single and fearless. He noticed. He always did. We talked for hours. About everything and nothing. I laughed in a way I hadn't in years. Not because something was funny, but because I wanted to be heard. To be seen. To be wanted. And then he said, "You're not like him." I asked, "Like who?" He said, "My father." And I didn't correct him. When he kissed me, I didn't stop it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just let it happen. Because in that moment, the world faded, and I remembered what it felt like to matter. But when it was over, when the silence came rushing back, I realized what I'd done. And worse, what I wanted to do again. We didn't speak the next day. He left before sunrise. I watched his car pull away from the window, coffee still untouched in my hand. My husband returned that night, exhausted and clueless. He kissed me on the cheek and asked what I'd done while he was gone. "Just cleaned," I said. A lie, but not the worst one I'd tell. The days blurred, but the silence between me and his son, it was loud, louder than words, louder than guilt. I saw him again 2 weeks later. A family dinner, forced smiles, too many eyes, too few truths. We didn't look at each other for long. But when we did, I saw it. The same ache. The same danger. And that's when I knew it wasn't over. It didn't become a full-blown affair. Not at first. It was moments, glances, messages, a hand on my back that lingered too long, a meeting in the hallway no one else was supposed to walk through, a holiday kiss that lasted 2 seconds too many, 2 seconds that ruined everything. He wasn't cruel. He didn't manipulate, but he didn't resist either. We were both willing participants in a tragedy we never dared name. The worst part? I felt alive. More alive than in years of marriage, more awake than in all the nights spent lying next to a man who couldn't hear me even when I screamed silently into the pillow. But I was still his wife, and he was still my stepson. It ended when he brought someone else to dinner. A girl his age, pretty, confident, oblivious. She laughed at my husband's jokes and touched his son's arm like they had a secret of their own. And for the first time, I felt what I had done. I wasn't the only one who could ruin lives, but I was the only one pretending I hadn't already started. That night, I told him it had to stop. No more looks, no more messages, no more excuses. He nodded, said he understood, said he was sorry, but I could tell he wasn't. And neither was I, because some lines once crossed never really fade. They just scar. And no matter how quiet I am, I can still hear what we did every time I sit at that table. And so does he.